The government publishes your recommendations on crime. Ahead tonight, what one of them will mean for the protection of children.
A new command post for some Defense Force officers, what the public had to do with their deployment.
And the Cybots and police face off going after a championship. The National Report starts now.
Now in HD. ZNS Network presents The Bahamas Tonight. This segment of the news is brought to you by BTC, powered by Lime.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Keishla Adderley.
And I'm Chris Saunders. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Topping the news, nearly a month after a crime forum soliciting the views of the public to curb crime, the government today issued a booklet containing 52 recommendations it's either implemented or is considering.
While some of the recommendations are already being followed, others require legislative guidelines. Tonight, though, Andrew Knowles tells us about one particular initiative with sentimental value to the National Security Minister and stands to protect thousands of Bahamian children.
Days to the day that young Marco Archer was found dead, there is a commitment from the government to honor his memory with potentially life-saving legislation.
We will be moving an amendment to the Child Protection Act, which, if passed, will establish a mandatory action for rescuing children known as the Marco Alert. This system, we hope, will garner the support of society as a whole and will aid in facilitating the recovery of abducted and/or endangered children. Of course, we prefer not to have a Marco's Alert, but as circumstances require it, we will now be better prepared for it.
The Columbus primary school student disappeared on September 23, 2011, and as Dr. Nonage recalls, the system prolonged the start of the search for the 11-year-old.
I was personally involved in the search for young Marco Archer when he went missing. And we were concerned about certain protocols that were in place that we thought hindered the recovery of the child. And so we are fixing that.
While in opposition, Dr. Nonage introduced the proposed Marco's Law, holding off on any public discussion while the case was still pending. But now that Kofi Goodman has been convicted of Marco's murder, Dr. Nonage is moving full steam ahead with key amendments.
Additionally, we will be tabling an amendment to the Sexual Offenders Act to provide for a sex offenders register. After consultation with the general public, it is hoped that both of these amendments will receive widespread public support and will be passed into the laws of our country before the end of this year.
His name may have been synonymous with rare child abduction cases, but soon it will represent a safeguard for our most vulnerable citizens. Andrew Knowles, ZNS Network News.
A portion of the Defense Force has been under a new command for about a week now, filling an urgent need for reinforcements in the fight against crime. Today, the National Security Minister and Defense Force Commodore talked about how the two forces are gelling and a new command post established to protect an illegal immigration hotspot. LaDon Davis has the story.
Defense Force Commodore Roderick Bowe says the transition from patrolling borders to assisting police officers in the fight against crime has been a smooth process.
We're learning the roles that they were playing there, and we're replacing them as we move along. And so here, when you came into this building, you would have noticed that we had a number of Defense Force personnel at the entrance here to ensure that persons don't just come freely into an important building such as this. We've also been placed at the Prime Minister's office, at the Attorney General's office, and other government offices to ensure that the work that the police were doing continue.
Since the deployment of the almost 100 Marines, Minister of State for National Security Keith Bell says there has been a decline in crime in many of the overpopulated areas. Additionally, Bell says to keep those numbers down, officers will be deployed to assist with a community-based Urban Renewal 2.0 program.
In going into the community, We anticipate through urban renewal that they would garner a greater appreciation for the extent of poverty here in our country, right here in New Providence. And we hope and anticipate that we're able to use their skills, their skill sets in the community. They're also providing and facilitating the police in terms of the walkabouts, in terms of moving through all of these communities.
Minister of National Security Dr. Bernard Noddard says there will be an increase in manpower by Defense Force officers at the South Beach border, as suggested by the Bahamian public. In fact, he says those officers deployed at the South Beach pools will be there permanently.
It is our intention to have 150 of them support the police in their activities. To date, we've just got over 100 of them fully deployed, and we will be deploying the remainder as the week goes by.
National security officials are not only encouraging Bahamians to be more receptive to Defense Force officers, but are also optimistic that this joint effort will put a dent in the crime war. LaDawn Davis, ZNS Network News.
In other news, Prime Minister Perry Christie says it will only take a response letter from cable and wireless communication executives to determine whether or not they will agree to return a 2% stake in the majority share of BTC to the Bahamas. Since returning to the government, Prime Minister Christie has made it clear that acquiring the majority shares of the country's telecommunication provider was a priority. The Prime Minister anticipates the deal will be finalized once both sides can form an amicable solution.
If there is no further response from him, then we must then inform the Bahamian public of the position as it is, meaning that cable and wireless has not found it possible to concede the 2% in circumstances that are acceptable to the government.
The Prime Minister was tight-lipped on disclosing the concerns both sides share in the agreement. However, he did confirm that while controlling BTC was an issue, cable and wireless communication executives wanted to ensure that government can pay to regain the 2% majority.
We told them that was never an issue, that we would not tamper with the management of BTC and that we would ordinarily have them manage it. And even when we were talking about having 51% privatization with 51% of the shares to Bahamians, we were conceding that the management would be to the minority shareholders. So there's never a question of my government trying to have the management of it.
The Prime Minister also spoke about the NASA Institute's economic consequences of the value-added tax for the Bahamas, that report. The document illustrates the economic consequences of VAT adoption, estimating it will burden the private sector with $103 million in annually reoccurring compliance costs and an average of $4,300 in compliance startup costs for each VAT registrant. The report concluded by pointing to failed VAT adoptions in countries similar to the Bahamas and highlighted efforts to reduce budget deficits through reduction in government spending. Prime Minister Christie, though, explained that he was not surprised by the study.
They have always taken positions that they say are protective of the economy. But in this case, we thought that the study was predicated on incorrect premises. And one of the things that I know that we must put in place is the capacity to answer quickly through informed persons who are not politicians these issues about that I say are usually intended to distort what it actually is.
The Bahamas has been identified as a major drug transit country in United States President Barack Obama's presidential determination on major illicit drug transit and major illicit drug producing countries for the fiscal year 2014. But according to the report issued by the U.S. Embassy, a country's presence on the presidential majors list isn't necessarily an adverse reflection on its government's counter-narcotics efforts or level of cooperation with the U.S. Rather, placement on the report reflects the ongoing challenge a country faces in combating transitional organized crime and highlights the need for continued bilateral support to counter the threat. The U.S. enjoys close collaboration with the Bahamas on counter-narcotics and citizen security. The U.S. government credits the Bahamas as an important partner in the Caribbean Basin Security Initiative. Through Operation Bahamas Turks and Caicos, law enforcement officers seized some 236 kilos of cocaine and 162 tons of marijuana by Bahamian authorities during 2012.
In our first look at weather, we still have that surface and mid-level trough across the Bahamas creating unstable condition, but there's a low-pressure system expected to form near the Bahamas. But outside of our studios just now, we have cloudy skies, your temperature at 84 degrees, relative humidity 70%, winds out of the north-northeast at 4 knots, your barometric pressure 1,013.3 millibars. That's 29.92 inches, and it is falling. But stay tuned, temperatures around the Family Islands, travel and boating forecast is still to come.
Another case is dismissed. Coming up, find out why.
And two teams go after a Government League basketball championship. We've got the highlights. You're watching the Bahamas Tonight.
This portion of the news is brought to you by Shell Helix Ultra. Performance you can see.